Welcome to the Creator's Adventure, where we interview creators from around the world hearing their stories about growing a business. People talk about being a solopreneur or having a career, and it doesn't seem like there's too much in between. But what if you have a career and want to be a solopreneur, but really enjoy the job that you have? We're going to talk about how that fits in and how you can do both. Hey everyone, I'm Brian McAnulty, the founder of Heights Platform. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, we're here today with Jasmine Katatikarn. She is a creative leader and entrepreneur with 20 years of experience in animation, VFX, and tech. Jasmine co-founded the Academy of Animated Art, an online school that brings in six figures in sales yearly. She manages this while working full-time at a Fortune 500 company. Most importantly, Jasmine is a mom of two young children, and she has designed a life that prioritizes what's most important to her, creating systems and strategies that allow her to excel in her career and business while still being present for her family. Jasmine, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It's always interesting to hear your bio said out loud to yourself. It's like, yeah. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, did I do it good with the bio? Do you feel that described you well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
All right.
approved. Let's say.
Great.
Yeah.
So my first question for you then is, what would you say is the biggest thing that either you did or you are doing that helped you to achieve the freedom to do what you enjoy?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. The first thing that came to mind was freedom, right? Freedom is it's a word, but freedom means something different to everyone. So for me, it came down what am I thinking? Financial freedom, work freedom, life freedom. But in general, in a high level, broad sense, the biggest thing, and this took me quite a while, is to just give myself permission to pursue what I really enjoy, not what others told me I should go pursue to become quote unquote successful. I'll say I always loved the arts. I always loved being creative, but I didn't give myself permission to do so until after college. It wasn't until I was 21. I had graduated from college with an economics degree, of all things, because that was, the kind of proper way to go into finance, that I finally gave myself that freedom to say, no, this is not what I enjoy. What do I enjoy? And I sat down and I was like, I want to do something creative. And that's where I think my freedom journey started. And the other thing would be to, in the same kind of thinking, is to think outside the box, beyond the social norms. Because even as, I embraced the freedom of what I enjoy, the creative, it took me a while to think outside of the 9 to 5, right? To be like, okay, I have to design my life around, work life, personal life. It fits into these boxes. They can't cross over. If anything seems out of the unusual, I felt a little strange, like I was doing something wrong. But more recently, as I grew in my career, grew in my personal life, I realized, thinking outside the box, creating my version of freedom, my version of how I want to live my life is really has brought me so much joy, especially in the past year. So I think those two things, just giving yourself that permission and then thinking outside of what we were taught and what does it look like to you.
Got it. Yeah, it's a great answer. So back in the early days of your career then, were you always in animation and VFX then after school, or did you do something else? And what were the big challenges that you faced in that transition that you're talking about of realizing oh, I want to be more creative?
Yeah, so it wasn't a straight path for me. I honed in and realized what I wanted to do, then I could be focused and put it in. But before that, growing up, I was encouraged to be a doctor. I should say strongly encouraged to be a doctor. So when I started college, and I still remember, I wanted to apply to art schools. I remember thinking, oh, I'm just going to apply to RISD for fun, right? But I can't take it seriously. so I always had that inside me, but I was like, no, I gotta be practical. I have to do this route. So I was pre-med my first year of college, and then I realized I did not love it enough to pursue that whole, medical trajectory. And I was like, what can I do next that won't cause too much chaos in my family's life? And that's why I chose economics. I like math, I thought it was a practical route. I still like numbers, but so that's why I went to economics. And so when I graduated, there was a key point in my journey where I was going to iBanking interviews my senior year of college. I still remember downtown New York City and, the big investment firms taking those interviews. And there's one interview where they asked me, I still remember wearing that business suit, and they're like, why do you want to go into finance? Why do you want to go into iBanking? And my I think the inner voice probably got frustrated with me enough at that point that I could hear it and be like, you don't want to do this. You can't do this. And I remember I gave that BS answer. I gave an answer. It was probably a pretty good answer, And I left that interview and I did not go to another interview. I was like, enough. It's been enough. Let me pursue what I actually enjoy. And that summer, I didn't know anything. I've done arts all my life, but as a hobby, right, on the side. And finally I'm like, where can I start? And this is back in the early 2000s. And I was like, let me learn Photoshop, Illustrator. So I took some super basic Photoshop, Illustrator classes in my hometown. And I started building a portfolio just that summer, super motivated because I finally took this leap. I think about it now and I was like, would I have that much courage now to make such a big change? I don't know, probably. But, and so I made a portfolio, and looking back on it, it was a horrible portfolio, but it got me in the door to become a junior package designer at Godiva Chocolatiers, the chocolate company. And at the same time, the person that taught me the Photoshop, the 2D software, the Photoshop and Illustrator was actually a 3D person. And he was like, you're picking this up really quickly. Do you want to look over here to this 3D software I'm working with? And I had never seen 3D before, in a software. It never occurred to me. I don't have that origin story of watching, Monsters Inc. or something and knowing I needed to be in 3D animation. A lot of my colleagues have that story. I just never had it. And then I saw this software and what he was doing in it. I was like, wow, that's amazing. I've never seen that. And that seed stuck with me. So even though I was doing I was doing package design, which was really interesting at the time for me, but I was like, you know what? That 3D over there was really interesting. So the following year, I applied to NYU for a master's program in digital imaging and design. And then that's how I gained that 3D expertise. I ended up working for a year, this is ironic, at NYU Medical Center for the medical school, doing 3D animations for the medical school. So I joked that I was still trying to bring in my past experience and kind of combining it. And then eventually I went into visual effects, where I worked on a lot of commercials, some film, and then to feature animation at Blue Sky Studios, where I worked on the Ice Age movies, Ferdinand. And yeah, that's how so it's not super straightforward, but I think once I saw what I it took me 22 years or 21 years to see what I actually wanted to do. And then once I saw it, I was like, okay, let's go get it.
Great. Yeah, so I think the course and everything that you have built now is something that's a really interesting topic, in the sense that what you've created is a lot of people, I feel, would have a similar thought of wow, VFX animation, this is a cool thing to learn, and maybe they even start to experiment with it and learn it, but then there's a huge gap between okay, I've figured out how to do this and I'm skilled at it, versus how do I make a career out of this? And from seeing your courses, it looks like you're bridging that gap. And I mention this because I feel like if somebody else is listening or watching this right now and they're thinking like, okay, well, I know I'm good at this thing, but like where is how I like what do I need to teach people about? It might not actually just be like, oh, like this is the exact like technical thing of how you do it, but it could be like things like, well, this is how you can make a career of it. These are the things you need to know. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of potential and things in like building that kind of course. But I'm more interested in like, what's the story of why you decided to start Academy of Animated Art?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much in that same kind of story where I was going on recruiting trips for my studio, Blue Sky Studios, to recruit students to, get a job in the industry. And, I was going to great schools like SCAD and, some really good art schools. And I was looking at the student portfolios and I realized specifically in lighting. So my specialty for the past 20 years has been in lighting. There's many different departments within animation, and lighting is a specialty within it. And specifically for lighting, no one had the portfolio to get that job, that intro job. And I was thinking, and I came back to the studio and I was talking to one of my coworkers at the time, how sad it was that students spend so much time, so much money on this education, and then they come out without the knowledge they need to just get that first job. And he also had gone to recruiting trips too, and he was like, you know what, I saw the same thing. And then I thought back to my own education, and while I learned the basics, I basically learned how to like push, very much focus on software and like pushing those buttons, but they didn't really teach you what you needed to know to get into a job. And it's kind of by luck, right? It's like people that have talent or have the grit to like go and like get those jobs. So we kind of looked at each other, and at one point we're like, you know what? We know exactly what studios are looking for, what you need to become a successful artist. Why don't we just teach it? And that's exactly what we did. So that's where we started the academy, and that's why our focus is, because I'm a very practical person still, like I need a goal. I don't want to just teach someone to teach someone. Like, no, I'm going to teach you exactly what you need to know to, one, become a great artist, not to just learn a software, learn the foundation so you can use any software. But then number two, to get that job, like just like super focus in, not deviate you at all, and get you that job fast in the door, and that's how you grow. So that's how we created. That's the start of the academy, and that's what drives us. I mean, it's great to just create, but even better to impact lives with actually getting them a job, and then they get their dream job and their dream life.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I think you described it really well, and it's so important because what you're doing is like you're providing this result for people. Nobody wants to like just learn the software. There's a reason they want to learn the software, and it's because they want to become this great artist and they want to be able to build a career out of that. So
yeah, exactly.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
All right. One of the things I want to discuss is that, and we talked a little bit quick about it in the kind of pre-interview, that other than being a co-founder, you also are still at this full-time job. And besides that, you're also a mom of two. So I'm curious, how do you achieve optimal work-life balance? But also, like, what are your thoughts about that? Because some creators, I feel like, think like, okay, well, I am doing this job and then maybe I'm going to quit it and then I want to become this like full-time entrepreneur. And yeah, so I feel like there's a distinction where some people feel like they have to be like one or the other. What do you feel about that?
I have lots of thoughts on that. So first I'll start with, so I've always had a full-time job while creating, my academy or any coaching or anything else I do. If you asked me 10 years ago, I would have said my goal is to quit my full-time job, and success looks like running my business completely, full time and, having a great life. Like that kind of uh, romanticized, like ideal scenario of an entrepreneur. And what I realized through the years is and this is kind of also like thinking outside the box, out of the social norm, like a norm, that's like a norm entrepreneur, right? That's the ultimate goal. You start on the side, you quit. And not to say I'm not going to do that in the future, but I've kind of reframed it in my mind that, I no longer think of it as a fail that I'm working I do it by choice. I don't have to do it, first of all. Like I could do that path of just going full on into my academy and all my other endeavors, but I do it strategically. Like what I look at it now is I try not to say full-time job. I just look at it as almost like another business, right? Like everything has its part to play. I look at things as kind of like a puzzle piece, like a big puzzle. And this is an analogy that I like because it kind of makes sense. It's like we have these puzzle pieces of life, right? We have work puzzle pieces, we have personal, we have kids, we have all the things that make us, and we're kind of the big puzzle. And the puzzle changes throughout life, right? Like a piece that was once important, maybe not as important anymore. But instead of leaving it there, then it's like, let's get creative. What puzzle piece do I want to put in there now? And puzzle pieces changes in size, right? So the way I look at it is for instance, my full-time job now brings in a lot of things that I can't get from my academy, right? Like it nurtures a lot of the business, a lot of the leadership things that I probably couldn't get in isolation. And it fosters a lot of like the tech side that and it all fits together in a way to create this master puzzle that makes me really happy, like kind of that freedom to enjoy. It's like you don't depend on one person to bring you like pure happiness, right? If you did, then that's actually a problem because that's a lot of pressure on that one person. But then it's probably it's not going to be possible. That's why you have friends. That's why you have your significant others. That's why you have your family. Everyone kind of plays its part. So it's what I think about work now too. To just have one thing that you work on, why would we do that? Why wouldn't we put multiple things together? And I found this a lot, especially in the creative field, when I was working as an artist, that, you have all these creatives under a studio, and they're amazing. But what happens is they put all their creativity into that job. But it's a job. At the end of the day, it's still a job. And then a couple of years go by and they feel themselves like deflating a little creatively. And then they wonder what happened. And I was like, because you put all of your eggs in that one puzzle piece, when really that is one piece of the puzzle, right? It gives you, money, but it also gives you kind of that creative freedom in one way, but you still have to embrace other things. Like I used to take wood making classes. I used to take the most random things while I was a computer artist because I was like, I need to keep that going. I took like a stained glass class, like things that don't relate at all, but will keep on sparking that puzzle. So a long-winded way of saying, think of your life as a puzzle, and that's how I've been doing it. And that's when I realized, you know what, if I just had only my business, my academy, I'd probably be missing something somewhere else. And I also wouldn't be growing as quickly and learning as quickly and gaining those different perspectives. So that's why I designed it the way I do now. And that's why I kind of feel like this is my version of success and freedom, because I have that freedom to kind of figure out the different areas I want and put together. So that's that answer. That was kind of long-winded. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Well, I just want to say that I think it's interesting because you have like you mentioned the woodworking class, right? And it might sound silly, but like I'm sure that like there was something that you did there that you made a connection with that, even though it's completely unrelated, that like sparked some kind of inspiration in what you were doing with other things and with the animation and VFX. And I found that to be true myself in things that I do and other hobbies and things that I do. I think it's completely unrelated things can really help spark ideas in other things that you're doing. So I think, yeah, it's important to not only, like, people say focus is important, and I agree it is, but doing these other different things really help you expand your creativity and your thinking.
I couldn't agree more. I recently just came from a sound exhibition last night, and someone asked me if I wanted to go, and I was like, you know what? I think I do want to go, because you never know. I'm not I'm not a music or a sound person, but I was like, I bet I can get something out of, like, something's gonna happen. I'm gonna think of something, and it's great. It's just like, and it doesn't even have to be that specific thing. It could be whatever you see walking to it, right? Be like, oh, that's interesting. So just keeping open. I totally agree with that. And then on the point of like the work-life balance, having all of these things, especially with the family. I have 2 young kids, 7 and 5, so they still are quite dependent. The big thing for me, and this is an iterative process, right, is, well, one, to be clear on what your priorities are. And, I know we all say what, be like, what's your priority? And I feel like this, by default, everyone, if you have a family, or even if you, like, they're like, oh, my family, my kids, or whatnot. But then sometimes you look at their schedule and it doesn't really show that, right? So I think the big thing is, like, be clear on the life that you want, because one thing as an entrepreneur I found is, and I talk to people about this, when they're deciding what type of entrepreneur they want to be, I was like, what lifestyle do you want, right? Because the person that opens up a restaurant, let's say, is going to have a very specific type of lifestyle versus an online course creator, or someone that wants to open up a big tech company, right? And I was like, before you invest into whatever vision you have, make sure it's the life you want. Because often, what about the restaurant owner that doesn't like to work nights, or, wants to take that vacation, but finds for the first couple years they can't take any vacation. They're working 7 days a week, and they're working late evenings, and they're not a night person. It's like, these are like the things you should think about before. So one, be clear. Be clear about the life you want to have, and then design whatever you're planning from there. And I think in that vein, the way that it really helps me, especially as a mom, is I carve out time for my kids and my family, because that's like easily the first thing to go, especially when you get busy. But this might sound not like organic, but I will actually put it in my schedule, because I joke now, if something's not in my schedule, it doesn't happen, because I'm always looking at it. So I have blocked out times for, like, each of my kids, essentially, like a one-on-one meeting. The same way you do one-on-ones at work, why not do that with your kids? And then you have that dedicated, focused time. So basically carving out that time to actually prioritize. So it's on your calendar. When you get busy, you see it, and think of it as, like, the most important one-on-one, the one-on-one with the CEO, right? You're not going to miss it. It's there. And that's how you prioritize that. And then the biggest thing is, think of yourself as the CEO of your life. And I know it's kind of like, of course, you're leading your life, but I feel like a lot of people don't think of their lives like that, especially if they're not a leader, per se, in their job or whatnot. They're like, I'm not a leader. I'm like, everyone's a leader. Everyone's a leader of their life. So imagine you're the CEO of your life, which you are. How can you maximize your time? And I think time is the most precious thing that is the first thing to go out the door. And the biggest thing when you're trying to balance all this stuff out is look at what you're doing. What can you delegate? What can you stop doing? Because and that's the way of thinking of, like, a CEO, right? Like, a CEO is not doing everything. It's kind of looking at the high-level view. So look at the high-level view of your life and look at all the things you're doing. Even, like, you can get even super tedious and, put it all out there. And then see, what can I delegate? What can I stop doing? and then get that time back. And that is when I feel like the work-life balance really comes into play. And then life's good, and then you're enjoying it exactly how you designed it. So there's a lot of things in there, but overall, yeah, just be clear about what you want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. I would say to one of the earlier points about like the scheduling time and even like putting it on like the calendar for spending time with your kids. I would kind of challenge anyone who would like have an initial reaction to that and say like, oh well, Jasmine's doing that. That doesn't really feel like organic or whatever. But like the point is like it's not about like if you have your own way of scheduling things that you don't have to use a calendar or whatever, that's fine. But the point is that if you really sit down and look at like how you're spending your life, you should look at like are there things that you're doing where you're spending time that's not actually what you would want to be doing? Like are you sitting there on your phone like scrolling through social media for like hours when you could be doing all those other things, right? And so by you going through that exercise and saying like this is actually on my schedule, you're ensuring that like the things that are important to you are where you're actually spending your time. And so I think that's really important to for everyone to think about. And I like that concept of like you're the CEO of your own life, because I found that like it applies to so many things of like lifestyle of like I feel like it applies to even like where you spend like investing your money on like for personal enjoyment, even not just like business. But I find that like if you ever feel that you're comparing yourself to somebody else that you see, like let's say like, oh, they have this cool thing or they have this cool lifestyle, whatever it is, and you think for a second like, oh, well, I want that, realize that you're actually looking like into yourself and finding out maybe like did you have the wrong priority of what you really wanted. Because I think like even if you're not like super wealthy or something that you can just go and spend money and say like, oh, I want this, now I'm going to buy that, now I'm going to invest in that. It's still like everybody has some kind of time or money that they can invest into changing their life. And if you see something else from somebody, like think to yourself like, do you really want that above everything else that you're doing? Or is it something that like it's just nice to have, but what you are currently doing is more important? And like realize everybody's making those same like choices and trade-offs. And so I think yeah, it's really important to really think more deeply about that, because yeah, time is the most valuable thing that everybody has, and you are in control like no matter what in some way of being able to decide how your time is used.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we all have the same amount of time, right? Um, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to speak to the structure of, putting something on a calendar. I get this all of the time, especially working with creatives. They're like, you can't give me structure because I'm creative. I need that like freedom to do whatnot. But, speaking, I am very creative myself, but I think that is a misconception where people like, they don't want structure because they want freedom. But it's in the structure that gives you that freedom, which is kind of it's like an odd thing to say, but it's
100%.
totally true, right? And it also gives that freedom of mind to
Mm-hmm.
not think about something. Like we only have so much in our minds that we can process every day, and the more we make things a habit or automate, then it becomes easy and it opens up our minds to creating, to be innovative. So
Yep.
to anyone
Exactly. Yeah.
that,
It's
yeah,
really
it
the
is.
opposite.
Right.
Like, yeah, I would argue that as well as a creator myself, that when I started my business, I used to think no schedule, like that's I'm being an entrepreneur. I can respond to an email whenever I feel like, and like it doesn't matter if it's in work hours or not. And I feel like I relatively quickly learned like, oh, actually it is better to have a schedule. And yeah, like as you're saying, I would argue that it's the opposite, because if I have all these different meetings or tasks or whatever pulling me all these different directions, where's the time to be creative and
Exactly.
focus, right? And so then I'll purposely schedule like an interview like this, what we're doing now. Like I have multiple scheduled today, so that way like this is the day when I'm doing those things, and then like the next day I can go and sit down and be creative without
Yep.
distractions. So yeah, super important.
And then one other thing I'll say, if someone's like not sure about what their what they want their life to look like, or their priorities. They have a really fun exercise that I have people do is go down to your favorite coffee shop, whatever, pen and paper, and write down, think about what would be your ideal work day and then work weekend day, because I think they're two different things, right? Because in that way you can also kind of put in a little bit more of the personal, but just write it down like your everyday. And what that does, and be as detailed as possible, like, I'm drinking a cortado, reading the newspaper, like just break it down. What would your ideal day look like? And then what that does is you can look at that and analyze it. And then you can see just like subconsciously what your priorities are right now and what you would like your day. It kind of gives you a direction to go into. And it's a really fun exercise. And then I have people highlight like what they can do right now. Because I think that's another misconception. Like people like, one day I'll live this life. One day I'll, make it or do whatever. But why not start today? Why not start living the way you want today? And what this simple exercise does, when people highlight, like, well, I like challenge them, like, well, what can you start doing today? And they're like, well, I can start doing this today. And then before you know it, most people's page is like at least half highlighted. And then they can take action right away towards that ideal, that work-life balance that they, think is in the future, could be starting tomorrow. And then they progress, and then you look back and you're like, oh, look, I'm living my ideal day right now. And it's kind of this fun thing to do, and it's a super low lift that anyone can do. So that's a little fun exercise I like to kind of challenge people to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great exercise because also I think there's things that you might initially consider to be like almost a luxury or something that you don't really need, where it feels like hard to say like, oh, well, actually I could do this. But then once you do it, like you realize as well. And so like what I'm talking about more clearly is like it could be things like listing the things that you realize you're spending time on right now that you maybe don't enjoy spending time on. It could be like things around the house, like related to cleaning or like yard work, and like realizing like, oh, well, actually I could like pay somebody to help me do those things like once or twice a week or whatever it is. And or it could be things related to your business and saying like, okay, well, I'm not getting enough time to create because I'm constantly talking with these customers and I know that's good, but maybe I could use some help with that kind of thing. And I think like sometimes in our minds we have this thought that like, oh, well, that's a luxury, like that's an expense that I can't really do right now. But if you challenge yourself to really think about it and you do invest in that, like it can be life changing for like allowing you to actually do what you care about.
Exactly. And that goes back to being the time, value, like taking your time into account, and then being the CEO, right? Delegate, like what you said, the cleaning, or just the interaction, the email. It took me years to finally say like, okay, I don't want to be doing this. Let's delegate this out. And now I'm free to create, like free to do what I love, and then delegate out what, is also busy work that someone else can do for you. So yeah, totally agree.
Definitely. So you've had an impressive career in animation and VFX industry. You mentioned like you worked on projects like Ferdinand, Peanuts, Ice Age. How would you say like the experiences in that and like affected your current business, or maybe even still like affects your current business?
I mean, the obvious one is, of course, my expertise and experience, and that led me to create the academy to then teach, people that same skill set and share my experiences, right, and advise and consult and coach. So that's the obvious. The other thing that was not so obvious that I realized is animation and VFX taught me the power of storytelling, which, seems like now that I say, I'm like, of course, animation is all about storytelling, but then it made me realize that everything's about storytelling. Like, even my tech job right now, it's about storytelling. What kind of story am I trying to tell to get buy-in on investing in this product, right? So I think, coming from the entertainment industry where everything is based around the story, the way I light, like what kind of story am I trying to tell, and lighting, like where am I directing the viewer's eye. The same thing holds true with every single industry, like marketing, like you're trying to tell a story. You're trying to like share what you want to share with whoever your audience is, um, and have them, share their own stories too. So I think when it comes down to it, that's the biggest impact in my current, and I continue to think about, whenever I'm writing even like a business doc or like what's the story, I like step back and like what's the story am I trying to tell? And we're all storytellers, and I think that's how you really engage with people and get them involved and excited, right? And what's their story? What is your story, right? I think that's the connection that one can never also be replaced by like AI or something like that. Like we're all unique in our own ways, and that's where I'll encourage also entrepreneurs, like even if you see someone doing something similar than you, they're still not you, right? What's your unique story to that with your spin? It's going to be different, and tap into that. So I think that's the biggest impact that working in the animation field has really helped me with and continues to help me with. I almost think of like, I think of the storylines of an animation sometimes. It makes me smile. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so many great points there. And I think you brought up a really good one about like course creation in general. Like it's your unique message is what people care about. And that's so powerful because if you had like an e-commerce business or something like that, you're selling like these like physical widgets on Amazon or whatever, like you might be selling exactly the same thing as
Yeah.
somebody else. And like you can tell a story around that and like try to tell it better of why they should buy yours. But it is the same thing. Like there is no difference. And so people worry about competition, but like that's when you have to worry about competition when like you're really like competing with exactly the same thing. When it comes to like a course business, a community, like no one can compete with that. That like what you have is completely unique. So even if it's the same field, like there is no one that has your message. And I think that's a really good way to frame it and to look at it that creators should keep in mind if you're worried about like the competition
Yeah.
out there.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
And the storytelling though, like in general, I agree is super important as well. And I think we think to ourselves sometimes that like, oh, this isn't like I'm not like trying to like entertain people here or something, but like really you are, and that's still important because like you want to have people's attention and like investment in whatever it is that you're doing with them. And so even like you mentioned like the business document and everything or like a proposal, like I think that's an excellent example, but I find myself more and more thinking about that like with everything. Like to be honest with this interview here, I was thinking like, okay, well what's the best way to do it? And I'm actually like been questioning myself as we go through it because I think we have a really good engaging conversation now. And I was wondering like, well, should we have started more with this part and then told like your background later or something like that? But I think like it's always important to think about this and like how you're telling the story because everything you're doing you're telling some kind of story behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I would joke it's like the power of editing. You can kind of edit it in order to tell, to go
Mm.
back and kind of play with the storyline. But yeah, and I mean, your story it's a continuous process. I think that's what's so interesting about anybody's journey is probably no one could have, I know I couldn't have predicted where I am today 10 years ago or how I got here. Although I love my plans and whatnot, my spreadsheets. I love to like that, but there's something about kind of the organic conversation, right? Too of figuring out where you're going, and I'm all about making plans and visioning out where you want to be, but then also being open to the other things that will pop up. Kind of the similar thing that you're saying, we were talking about like woodworking or like taking these other things that will spark something that you might not have expected. So my thing too about is about like entrepreneurship or just life in general, like make your plans. I'm completely about having that idea of what you want and focusing in because otherwise you'll just be too aimless. But then like have that vision around you and keep your eyes open, because you never know what's going to happen, and then be opening to pivoting or adjusting, and being flexible. So I think that's also really important in life in general as you're going through learning.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. So I think speaking of that, one of the things that's rapidly kind of evolving in the world today is AI. So I think it's interesting to see how creators begin to leverage that. Can you share any examples of how you have started using AI in your creative processes?
Yeah, so I know AI is a very, hot topic, and especially among creatives, right? And for me, in my perspective of AI is I see AI as another tool. Same thing when the camera was, first developed. How can I utilize this in my creation process? And I know, AI is a bit different from that, but instead of fearing it or fearing the possibilities of, like, especially from the creative perspective, I've heard a lot of like jobs are going to go away, and this is for every sector actually, tech, everything. It's so early in AI. Now is a time to explore, be curious, and just learn. Like, digest as much as you can and leverage it. So for me, personally, I've been playing with it. Like, if you go on my Instagram, I have like some AI stuff, Gen AI stuff that I've been playing with, just to like get a feel of what the capabilities are. On the business side of it, I've been playing with it, speeding up my productivity for all these things. And basically, how can you leverage it? So I think AI is a great tool. I do think there needs to be regulation around it, and hopefully that will be coming. And in the meantime, just deep dive, go into it, be curious. Think about if you're doing a course creation, for instance, like the easiest thing is have AI as your assistant with your course outline, right? And I've done this. I was actually just doing this the other day for a new thing. And it's amazing. And you can like talk to it and give it specific notes and then use it as like a brainstorming session. And it's a productivity tool. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like AI is just a super power productivity tool that can optimize your time, your output, and 10x things that would have had you outsource out for a certain expertise. But it's the time to utilize it. Because I think as an entrepreneur, for sure, when we're so lean and we don't have that many resources, especially when you're starting out, it's like an amazing tool that you can utilize. If there's anything, I will say, whenever I run into a headache of like, oh, this is taking me so much time, now my go-to is like, I bet there's an AI tool that will help me. And then I'll go on to Google and do this. And I just did this the other day for editing a video really quickly because I was doing something that was super tedious. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. And within 5 minutes, I found this amazing tool. I think it's called Descript AI. And it my mind.
Yep, we use that.
And it's like, it's amazing, right? And I was like, okay, well, this just saved me 5 hours of my life today. Like, huge. So the thing about it, so that's what, especially for your audience of entrepreneurs and especially solo ones, that, there's only, going back to time, there's only so much time in the day. Go and dive into AI, learn how to leverage it, and and then as a creative, it is a great creative tool, I have to say. I was playing with Stable Diffusion last night with my kids, which is a local, like a standalone Gen AI, and oh my god, they were having so much fun. Like, we were all having fun. We're like, let's create what was it? A peacock sea monster wearing a gold party hat. And I could share, like, the output. It was hilarious. And my kid, we were up way too late doing it. And we're like, let's do this one, let's do that one. So it's like a way to kind of bring your vision to life in like a quick iterative visual way. And as a creator, I'm just like, my mind is like going, I'm like, oh, I wish I could stay up all night. It's like I'm in college again, and I'm like, want to pull all nighter to
Mm,
work on a project. And it's, I mean, talk about another kind of spark, right? Like woodworking or whatever. It's like, then now I have all these ideas of the possibilities. And to speak to like AI replacing, creatives or techs or, engineers or whatnot, I mean, I still see as a tool, you still need an expert in there. Like I run a team of engineer, like programmers, and if you're not a programmer, you can't like you can type something into AI, but you need someone, you need that expert still to like go through. And there's bugs, there's things that you need to troubleshoot. So at this point, I'm not seeing it being like anyone could go in and do all that stuff. That's why I see it as a productivity tool. Like someone with an expertise already, how can you then like 10x that? So yeah, that's my
yeah,
view on AI so far. But it's super fun. If you haven't gotten into it, I highly encourage it.
definitely. Yeah, I think that it's such an incredible time. And for like the individual entrepreneur, the small team
Mm-hmm.
especially, AI is so powerful in being able to leverage that. And all of a sudden you can do so much more now. And like to be clear, like we're not talking about like having it do
Yeah,
everything for you. Because like as we said earlier, like it's your unique message is what's important, and like AI can't
yeah,
be that. Only you can be that. But it can do all of these things to help you like do these tedious things, brainstorming. Like one of the things I did is we took all of our podcast episodes and like we embedded it into the AI. So then I could go and ask it like, what's the most surprising thing I ever said, or like what are like top like five interesting things I talked about, like all this kind of thing that like it would take hours of yourself or somebody else to like go through and like try to figure that out and start to list it and rank it. But you can just like ask AI about that right away, and like that will give you ideas for like more content that you can create and more things that you
yeah.
can build.
I agree completely.
Awesome. Well, one of the things we like to do on the show is have every guest ask a question to the audience. So, Jasmine, if you could ask our audience anything, whether it's something that you kind of want them to think about or something that you're just curious about, what would that be?
Interesting. So one, I think my question would be going back to, that simple exercise that anyone can do like right now would be, what does your ideal workday or weekend day look like? Um, Write it down, highlight what you can start doing tomorrow or today, and also take a look at it and then see if like where your priorities are, because then you can kind of see what's important to you. You might surprise yourself. You're like, oh, I didn't realize that would be part of such an important part of my day, but it is. I need that, walk in the park for an hour or something. Like that's where I think the work-life balance really helps kind of play a part in how you vision your unique version of freedom and your balance in life. So yeah, I think that would be my question. What's your ideal day look like? And then feel free to send it to me. Because that's a funny thing. It's like I'm asking you this question, but yeah, will I ever get the answer back? Um,
Yeah, well, we'll have it on when this premieres live, you'll be able to see on our
no, great.
YouTube. Um, but yeah, definitely. Also, like if depending on when you're watching this, or if Jasmine doesn't see it, like please send it to her. And yeah, then to finish this off, then where can people find you online?
Yeah, so for the Academy, the Animation Academy, our tag is Academy of Animated Art, and that's also our website, academyofanimatedart.com. And then for me personally, and then for my creativity coaching aspect of my career, you can find me at Jazz Katat. So it's JAZZKATAT. Is my tag on Instagram, would be the best place. There's also a website. I always think I should change that tagline, but my name is so long, so we'll see. To my full name, but I'm always like, my last name feels really daunting to people. But yes, Jazz Katat for now.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming
Yeah,
on the show.
thanks for having me.